The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitely settled, but the very definiteness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my good will. I continued, as was wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my to smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in other regards he was a man to be respected, even feared. He prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gemmery, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in matters of old wines he was sincere. In this respect I did not differ from him materially. I was skilful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely wherever I could. Now, it was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley, jester's outfit. He had on a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and... bells. I do like these bells. Yes. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I may never be done wringing his hands. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado. I have my doubts."
"Ah, how?" said he. "Amontillado? Impossible. And in the middle of a carnival?"
He was very drunk. "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You, were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing the bargain."
"Amontillado?"
"I have my doubts."
"Amontillado?"
"And I must satisfy them."
"Amontillado."
"As you're engaged, I am on my way to Lucchesi. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me..."
"Lucchesi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry."
"And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own."
"Come, let's go."
"Whither?"
"To your vaults."
"My friend, no, I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucchesi..."
"I have no engagements. Come."
My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre, mould.
Ah, let us go, nevertheless. The cold, merely nothing. Amontillado, huh? You have been imposed upon, and as for Lucchesi, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado.
Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm, and putting on a mask of black silk and drawn a cloak closely round my person, I suffered him to hurry to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded, to make merry in honour of the time. I had told them that I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, once and for all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from their sconces 2 torches, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down along a winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious, as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together upon the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady. The bells, the bells, upon his cap, they jingled as he strode.
Amontillado, huh?
It is farther on, said I. But observe the white webwork which gleams from these cavern walls. He turned towards me, and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the room of intoxication.
Nitre?
He asked at length. Nitre, I said. How long have you had that cough?
Oh, I just just
My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes.
It's nothing,
he said at last. Come, said I with decision, we will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy, as I once was. You are a man to be missed. For me it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchesi.
Enough, he said. The cough's a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough.
True. True, I replied. And indeed, I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily. But you should use all proper caution. A draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damps. Here I knocked off the neck of the bottle, which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mould. Drink, I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly, while his bells jingled. Oh, I do love the bells.
I drink, he said, to the buried that repose around us.
And I to your long life. He again took my arm, and we proceeded.
These vaults, he said, these vaults are extensive.
I'm sorry?
These vaults are extensive.
The Montresors, I replied, were a great and numerous family.
I forget your arms.
Oh, a huge human foot door in a field azure. A foot crushes a serpent rampant, whose fangs are embedded in the heel.
And the motto?
Nemo me impune lacesset.
Good.
The wine sparkled in his eyes, and the bells jingled. Oh, My own fancy grew warm with the Madoc. We had passed through long walls of piled skeletons with casks intermingling into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by the arm above the elbow. The nitre, I said. See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drop of moisture trickles among the bones. Oh, come, please. We must go back before it's too late. You'll cough.
Ah, it's nothing. Let us go on. But first, another draught of the Madoc.
I broke and reached him a flagon of de Grave. He emptied it at breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards with gesticulation which I did not understand.
You do not comprehend? He said.
Not I replied.
Then you are not of the Brotherhood.
How?
You are not one of the Masons.
Yes, I am. Yes, yes.
You? Impossible. A Mason.
A Mason, I replied. Yes.
A sign. Show me a sign.
It is this, I answered, producing from beneath the folds of my cloak a trowel.
You jest.
He exclaimed, recoiling a few paces.
Well, let us proceed to the Amontillado.
Be it so, I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak, and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again, arriving at a deep crypt, in which the foulness of the air caused our torches rather to glow than flame. At the most remote of the crypt there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vaults overhead. In the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris, in fact. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th side the bones had been thrown down and laid randomly upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall, thus exposed by the displacement of the bones, we perceived a still interior crypt or recess. In depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6, or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no especial use within itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of those circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavoured to pry into the depths of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. Oh, please do proceed. Herein is the Amontillado. Perhaps Lucchesi...
He is an ignoramus,
interrupted my friend, and he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In the niche, and finding an instant, he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links around his waist, it was but a work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. Pass your hand, I said. Over the wall you cannot help feel the nitre. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. No? Oh, then I must positively leave you. But I must first render you all The little attentions in my power.
The Amontillado!
Shouted my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. Oh, true. The Amontillado. As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I have before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low, moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with a bit more satisfaction, I ceased. I sat down upon the bones, and stopped my labours. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed. The trowel I picked up and finished without interruption the fifth and sixth and seventh tier. The wall was now nearly upon a level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the torch over the mason work, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud, shrill screams bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form seemed to thrust me violently back. For a moment I hesitated, I trembled, and sheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess. But the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs. I felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall, and I replied to the yells of him who clamoured. I re-echoed, I aided, I surpassed them in volume and in strength. The clamourer grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last of the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight, but I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came from out of the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs on the back of my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing, of that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, very good joke, an excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the Palazzo over our wine, The Amontillado, said I. Yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will they not be waiting for us at the Palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone. Yes, I said, let us be gone. For the love of God, Montresor! Yes, I said, for the love of God. But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, Fortunato! No answer. I called again, Fortunato! No answer still. I thrust the torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick. It was the dampness of the catacombs that made it so. I hastened to make an end of my labour. I forced the last stone into position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For half a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescat fortunatum. Rest in peace. There we go. So that is The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe, 1846. Quite a fun little read, that. Move the bells. Just grab my Amontillado. Lovely. Right, well, if you enjoyed that, I'm going to do another one next weekend, probably Saturday, 8 o'clock, unless we're doing something else, in which case it'll be a Sunday. But yes, I hope you enjoyed that. And as always, raising money for Finn for his uni funds, which I will put into the comments box in a moment. I forgot to put it into the main information area, but never mind. So if people would like to donate, or they liked what they saw, or you enjoyed what I did, support the arts. Throw Finn a quid into his PayPal. That'd be great. We are supporting Finn because he's doing a composer's course up in Leeds and doesn't really have the money for the first year. We've raised a good few grand already, but we're still doing it. And don't forget, we've got the TARDIS online bookshop as well. So if you find that on Facebook and you like books, lots of very cheap, good, donated second-hand books. If you'd like to donate some books to us, give us a call as well. I say give us a call, but find us on Facebook and that malarkey. But I really hope you enjoyed that. I found that a lot of fun to read. And I think I'm going to call this Povember, like Edgar Allan Poe, November, Povember. I don't know if that's ever been done before, but that's what I'm calling this November. So the rest of November, I will be reading other Poe stories or poems, and then in December, I think I'm going to start with the Christmas Carol, perhaps, which is a bit of a big one, but I'm going to do it in weekly parts. So maybe that'll work, yes? Anyway, we'll see how it goes. And perhaps I may even read The Signalman by Charles Dickens as well, which is one of my favourite ghost stories. Anyway, I was Lee, and that was The Cask of Amontillado.